Hello, everyone. This is Tricia Ramsey, and on behalf of Zadara, Softcat, and 451 Research, which is now a part of S&P Global Market Intelligence, I would like to welcome you and say thank you for attending today's webcast titled Solving Data Storage Pain Points. Leading off today's discussion will be Henry Baltazar, who is Research Director at 451 Research. Joining Henry will be Steve Costigan, who is Senior Director Solution Architect at Zadara, and Paul Hyde, who is Services Integration Manager at Softcat. Just a few quick housekeeping items before we get started. To ask a question, simply type it in the question box on your screen. We'll get to as many as we can during the Q&A session. The presentation slides are available for download in the Resources section in the console. And finally, the on-demand version of the webcast will be available for download once the live webcast concludes. And with that, I'll turn it over to Henry.
Thanks a lot, Tricia, and thank you all for your time today. I think we're going to have a really lively discussion later today with Steve and Paul when we get later to the back half of this presentation. For my presentation, it'll be relatively short. What I want to focus on is what we're hearing from the market today in terms of what are the types of data storage challenges they're dealing with, and also giving a feel for where we are today with cloud storage, because we're clearly seeing a rise of cloud storage, especially as we start to see more and more of these challenges, key challenges hitting our organizations, and how they need to be able to provide these types of storage resources to run their applications and run their businesses. When we look at the key areas for data storage challenges, I think one of the things that struck me is when we have conversations, and this is a conversation I had with a large telecom company actually before the COVID-19 outbreak. So this is even before this, and we were seeing major issues such as this one in terms of, even a well-funded type of organization like this, telecom type organization with over 10 billion in revenue, even they have issues dealing with data problems and taking care to make sure they can handle data growth. In this particular case, what was scary about it was they ran out of capacity and they wound up having to delete data, only to figure out that they were going to regret this later. And I think this is going to wind up becoming a really common issue for many organizations, because when we start looking at what's going on in terms of the speed of data growth and what's going on with budgets, it's clear that we need to start making major changes to be able to make sure that we have sustainable environments going forward. When I ask customers about the top storage pain points, it's been about, for the last couple of years, it's been the same pain points, but what I continue to see is, as the most important part about this is every one of these pain points I list here, all those things are being made worse because of data growth. Your disaster recovery becomes a bigger problem because you have more and more workloads, more and more data to manage. Performance becomes more of an issue because you have to make sure you can manage all of these different applications at the same time while making sure there's enough IOPS performance, enough low latency, enough throughput. Very, very difficult things to do, especially in the context of how fast we're creating new workloads and how fast those workloads are transforming. Another key thing to think about is also what's going on with compliance and where data sits, how long we keep data, how we delete data. A lot of those types of issues are still very difficult for many organizations, and these are key issues where I think a lot of the organizations need to have much more help. And finally, I think the other thing we continue to see is more and more organizations are looking to get away from the high cost of CapEx, and that's usually associated with storage arrays. And for that reason, they're trying to find other models, whether it be OpEx-based models for systems they have on premises, or whether they go to cloud storage type options. A lot of people want to find other ways of doing things because the high cost of CapEx and being captive to a storage array for multiple years is just not as it's just not going to fly as well as it did in previous years. When we look at what's going on with storage budgets, in general, usually what I see is most organizations are growing their storage budgets, their on-prem storage budgets, by about 10% per year. But the problem is when we look at what's going on with data growth, it's not uncommon to see a data growth coming in at 20%, 30%, even 40% for some of the organizations we talk to, depending on what type of verticals they're using and what type of data they're creating. So when you look at that, there's no mystery. We're definitely in a space where the the growth of data is greatly outpacing the amount of money we're getting in budgets in terms of how we fix that. I think another thing that caught my eye when we were looking at the budget data was this particular chart here in terms of why is your on-premises budget decreasing. And we can see here is we saw a big increase in this from 2019 to 2020, from 44% of respondents saying budget was shrinking to go into cloud, going all the way up to 59% because of that, which really shows there is going to be some movement to cloud. Not everything's going to be in the cloud, but there's definitely the desire to move some things to cloud, and that's coming at the expense of some on-premises budgets. The other reasons we see for on-premises budget cuts are things that you would expect to see. You do see some IT spending cuts, which impact some of these things, and we also see a little bit on the bright side. What we also see is that the advent of new technologies, whether it be technologies for consolidation or space efficiency type technologies like compression or deduplication, those type of new technologies and the emergence of those is also allowing us to spend a little bit less on storage, which is a good benefit as well. But here we see that dropping from 24% to 16%. So while it's a benefit, it's something that we can take advantage of. It's not going to save us unless we start figuring out better ways of managing our resources. Turning to cloud storage, one of the questions we asked at the beginning of the year is, why are you going to cloud storage? And what struck me here was, it wasn't too much of a surprise, but a lot of the drive right now is on the data protection side, and a lot of it is also on long-term retention of data. So if you look at these top reasons, the first one was the replacement disaster recovery sites, with 37% respondents wanting to do that, and replacement of tape backup. That was another 34% that wanted to do that. But the other key thing to keep in mind here, it's not just about data protection. There's other reasons why we go to cloud. In some cases, it's driven by the people within the organization. Number two reason was the upper management directive to use cloud storage. And also, you do see end users, business units, and application requirements also driving these type of requirements as well in terms of why we need to get to cloud and why we're using it. Another key ingredient to cloud and what's powerful about it is that ability to get to that geographic expansion as well. That to me is another key capability, because a lot of organizations, even the large ones, want to get out of the business of running their own data centers, building their own data centers. Even if you go to a colocation center, that's not always the easiest option, and there's also cost involved in that in terms of putting your own equipment and running it there. As a result, we'll see more and more adoption of cloud, and I think when we start seeing that elasticity and the capability you can get from cloud, that's why a lot of these different use cases and why these directives are really pushing the move to cloud going forward. Another thing we asked about in the survey earlier this year, was where we are today. And right now, if you look at where we are in the market, the majority of organizations are using some form of cloud storage. You still have 39% in that lower blue box who say that they have all of their data protection on premises today, but that is still the minority. Even for larger organizations which have over a petabyte of data or more, that's still about only 42% say it's all on cloud. It's more common to see that 40% where you have organizations that want to do a hybrid type of deployment, where maybe they have some on-premises local backups with long-term stuff going to cloud. And you also have the 21% of organizations that are going all cloud, which is becoming more common when we look at some of the smaller organizations, especially smaller organizations that haven't already made an investment in backup platforms and backup hardware on premises. So as we start seeing this, right now, if you're not doing cloud, you're probably in the minority in terms of where we are with data protection today. With that, I'm going to kick things over to Steve.
Thanks, Henry. So in terms of the whole market space and where Zadara feels that we play in this hybrid cloud, we're fully aware that you can't predict the future. If you look back, maybe across the last 3 or 5 years, could you predict the technologies that you were deploying today, that you were using, how you were using them? And this is all being driven from application changes, technology changes. Businesses need to adapt quicker and smarter. We're seeing this in light of COVID, how businesses are having to react to rapid changes, both in terms of increasing cloud adoption, but maybe also increasing technologies on premises as well. And really what we're seeing within our customer base is that data is at the very center of every business. And we believe that you need a partner that can enable you to have that flexibility both up and down. And in the Zadara world, what we're seeing out there in the marketplace is, this hybrid cloud environment is driving a more complex environment. And what we mean here is, some data is residing on premises, some is being utilized by a service provider, others is going into the hyperscalers, and really having that flexibility to utilize the right storage in the right way at the right time is becoming critical. We're seeing the flooding of new applications, big data analytics. We're seeing the rise of DevOps. We're seeing the shift from a skills gap perspective of people moving from needing infrastructure people to needing more people that are data scientists, people who are DevOps type people. But that doesn't mean that we throw away things that we're traditionally used to doing. So, having a blend that mixes both on-premises and cloud is really, really critical for any business moving forward. So in that, why do we look at the services, and why do we look at a service model being cost effective? Well, if we look at some of the changes that has happened around EBITDA and the write-down of leases and onto the cost of the bottom line for most businesses, and you take into that the technology changes, just taking hard disk technology and SSD technology alone, we can see here that prices have continued to be driven down. And this is a model from Zadara's own analysis of our own customer base. As we've released new technology, those customers who maybe acquired Zadara technology in 2014 were able to make the shift at a 2-year interval, or maybe even less of an interval, into newer technology, maybe going from magnetic to SSD across 2014 to 2016 at the same or less cost. Now, if you're deploying traditional hardware technologies, you're probably going to sweat those assets for 3 or 5 years. That means that maybe you're not able to offer that balance of using technology in the right place at the right time, and therefore the as-a-service model can be more cost-effective over time. And really, we're seeing this dynamic shift. As the data mobilizes from location to location, we're seeing some applications move into the cloud, and then we're seeing those applications move back. They may be moving back because of cost. They may be moving back because of latency. There may be other reasons. Some people were early adopters into cloud and hyperscalers, and then suddenly found that those applications just weren't right for them. They're having to move those back on premises. So having that mobility of your data at a cost that is effective, you shouldn't be penalized for being able to mobilize your data and your applications. And this is what we see as a key component as we drive our market space and certainly this hybrid cloud capability. And really, to drive that mobility, you need a network that can deliver that. And really, where we've seen in some of our partnerships, like the partnership that we've held in conjunction with Rakuten, we're underpinning a global mobile operator who's delivering a 5G capability. And Zadara's data mobility capabilities, our ability to offer block, file, and object multi-tier capabilities, perfectly feeds into the needs of a telco class data mobility solution. And as we start to drive more and more fiber to the premises, 5G technologies, the mobility of data is going to become more prevalent. Therefore, then we're going to move into the latency requirements from different applications, especially as we start to move into new areas, IoT, self-driving cars, etc. This is where the next generation is going to come from. But let's not forget about the here and now. And if I look at a company that we've done a great deal of work with, Zebra Medical, they're using our object storage to provide a very high performant data as a service capability that they're looking for cures for things like COVID by using data analysis, and then mixing that with their on-premises GPU capability with Zadara being on-premises. So it's not just about taking your data to the cloud can actually come to you. And this is where the scalability both up and down is the perfect match from a service such as Zadara's. And really, as we look forward, we look at this new changing dynamic. We're going to see more and more of this edge type technology, driven by sensors, driven by videos, driven by smart cities. All of this data, is going to be analyzed somewhere. We believe that this is going to go into an edge, a service provider capability, and maybe then eventually it'll push up into the cloud. But this is where the service providers and good service providers who can handle your needs at all of these layers start to become really, really critical in the way that you adopt a hybrid technology. And this is really where we see our partnership with the likes of Softcat and their ability to offer managed services, on-premises capabilities, and this end-to-end capability across all tiers is really, really key. Paul, I know we've done a lot of work together over the last few years. I'd like to say thank you for your business and your partnership. Do you want to explain a little bit more of what Softcat does and how you use our technology?
Yep. So we provide managed services mostly to UK customers. We were traditionally, I guess, one of those companies that bought a big storage array every 5 years and hoped customers would come and buy that from us. We moved to the Zadara model to alleviate that because we were obviously starting to see cloud becoming more prevalent and people moving stuff off onto the cloud, which meant the storage usage would go down, but we'd end up still with a big storage array that we had to try and sell. So it made perfect sense for us to switch out to this different model. The partnership is great. What we do with you guys is it just works really well. So.
Great. Henry, back across to you. I believe we have a number of questions that we'd like to go through.
Yeah, thanks. Let's go to the next slide so they know who we're talking to. So here we go here. So I think one of the big topics we started out with on both of our sides was the topic of CapEx versus OpEx. And when I look at our numbers in terms of what we've seen preferences, right now, we still see more of a preference towards CapEx type purchases, but in the next 2-3 years, we're definitely seeing more of a shift to the OpEx side. For the Zadara side and Softcat side, for both Steve and Paul, what are you guys doing to make it easier for organizations to make them feel more comfortable making that transition from a CapEx model to more of an OpEx-based model?
I guess from the Softcat side, the initial conversations were challenging. The finance side of just getting them to understand what we were talking about doing and presenting those numbers back. But the storage, they definitely got that pretty quickly after it had been explained to them around, I'm going to stop coming and asking you for £500,000 every 5 years, and we know what that cost is going to be. It's on the OpEx model. Like I said, moving away from that big storage array to having storage on demand made so much sense for us, and I think the flexibility we have with Zadara has definitely helped and pushed us forward.
How about on your side, Steve?
I think from our perspective, we were born in the cloud. We didn't take a storage array and put a cloud front onto it. We built an infrastructure that was cloud from day one, to be multi-tenanted, to be scalable, both up, both down, and the ability to change technology on demand. And I think, that shift away from, his in, and sweat that for as long as you possibly can, at the risk of holding us back in terms of where it starts, is, I think that's for a time gone by. We look at how fast-paced businesses need to be in this global economy. Can you really say, well, I'm going to stand still for 2 years or 3 years? And having technology that enables you to be, not just reactive, but more proactive. And I think this is why, we've seen cloud grow at the pace that we're seeing them grow at, is this move to OpEx means that you're not tied to a physical piece of tin. A lot of our customers have moved with us. Some of our early customers like Softcat, they've moved through technologies, SAS drives, small scale SSDs, larger SSDs, NVMe. This is a technology that we're actually, enabling our customers to move to that and not restricting them in a way that CapEx would.
Okay. Another question for you, Steve. I'm just curious also, when we talk to organizations, because as you mentioned, you do sell on premises with the OpEx model as well. But one of the concerns we hear sometimes is what happens if we run out of capacity, other elements like that. What do you guys do within your management cycle as the managed service provider to help them get a better feel for what's going to happen with capacity management and future acquisitions? What are the types of things you're doing there to help organizations?
So the key there is working with the partner, working with our service provider partners, the end user customers, and utilizing, the fact that we're offering a managed service. We're monitoring it 24/7. We have capacity alerts. We have proactive team. The idea is not for us to take a traditional, and I suppose, I've been in storage a long time. We've all been in elements where you sell something to a customer and you may see them in 3 or 5 years' time, and having that mechanism whereby you say to them, hey, I'll see you in 3 years' time when your renewal's due. We can't operate in that way. We have to build that daily relationship, and that changes the dynamics. It means that what you're building with your customer is a true partnership. And that true partnership means that we're able to work with them on their new projects and their existing one. And that means that we can utilize some of our tools to look at their IOPS and their capacity and say, hey, here's a monthly or a quarterly review. We believe that if you changed in this way, we could actually save you money. How many service providers turn around to their customers and say, if you adopt our new technology, we're going to save you money?
Okay, let me turn this to Paul. So, Paul, you've got Steve on the spot here. How happy have you been about their projections? Because, let's face it, we all have margins we need to meet. We all also have risk. To balance that out, we need to have insight. Have you been happy, or have you felt that you've gotten the right type of advice in terms of how much you need now? Have you ever felt that, well, do we have enough, or what do we need to do going into the winter quarter? How have you felt in terms of the engagement, in terms of what you get from the customers, and balancing that out, looking at your customer side and then looking at the Zadara side to make sure that both are aligned when you start acquiring more resources?
Yeah, as Steve said, it's definitely been a partnership. We couldn't do this, I think, either of us alone or apart. It requires the constant communication. If I get sight of a potential project which is going to land with us, then Steve or anyone in the sales team will be the second person to know, because I need to start looking at that capacity and getting that in place if we need more drives, if we need more enclosures. It's never been a challenge. It's always been simple. They even loaned us some storage, which we ended up keeping in the end, which was quite a large chunk of storage to do some lifting and shifting of storage around. So that partnership, and I said before, that flexibility of how they've helped us makes it all worthwhile, because they almost become your storage team, because they're the ones that are monitoring it, and like Steve said, they can give us more of an insight of what the customers are doing, and we provide them with, we need capacity for this customer, and they tell us what it needs to look like, what the cost will be. If we need more, it gets shipped, it gets installed, it gets configured. It's taken a lot of the weight off. I think one of the things you said around skills gap, Steve, was just, when I was brought into Softcat, it was because I was a 3-part installation engineer, moved into support. You struggle to find some of the skills to do the delivery of the support of storage these days. It's not as widespread as it used to be. So having some experts on hand all the time takes that pain away.
Okay, well, let's move on to the next question. Obviously, COVID-19's impacted a lot of us and a lot of our customers. Let's turn to Paul. Paul, what type of applications do you see, what type of workloads do you see are more in demand now as opposed to before we had the outbreak?
Yeah, obviously the virtual desktop, so Citrix environments, but I think not only that, but a lot of the managed service customers had to do a bit of rallying around to make phone systems accessible externally. There was a lot of work in sort of March to bolster those environments and to do upgrades on lines and things like that. But definitely we're seeing an uptick in the Windows virtual desktop. So one of the services we deliver for Azure is an Azure accelerator. So it's an automated deployment of an Azure tenant, and we're adding on to that some automation which will stand up a Windows desktop proof of concept environment, because of the increase that we're seeing. People want to understand how easy it is to set it up and how that process works. So.
Okay. On your side, Steve, are you seeing any new workloads or anything interesting that's come up that you didn't expect to see, or you're seeing in greater quantities now?
Yeah, I think there's two ends really. We're seeing storage moving in two directions: higher performance because of SSD and NVMe, and larger capacities due to massive scale object. What we've seen as Paul highlights, this need to move to VDI type technologies that needs dedupe, compression, high performance, and then at the other scale, large scale object storage, particularly, with backup vendors like Veeam who have utilized object storage. We've had great success there. And part of that may be because people have, because of COVID, they've not been able to get into the data centers, therefore they can't rotate tapes. So they've been moving to an object storage technology, and we've seen huge growth from our object storage technologies, certainly from the backup vendors, and in particular, the likes of Veeam.
Oh, okay, great. Yeah, we'll definitely talk a little bit more on the technology side later in discussion. But another key thing that comes up a lot is, that role of security compliance. Usually a lot of people, if they try to talk their way out of cloud, that usually comes up as one of those concerns. What about security and compliance? Is it safe for me to move to a cloud? Let's start with Paul first. Paul, what are you doing on your side to help customers feel comfortable about moving their workloads to your cloud?
Yeah, security is obviously it's been the buzzword for the last few years, but I think it's definitely the cloud is more prevalent because you're removing some of your controls from that. So the accelerator service, particularly with Azure, that we do is around using the CIS benchmarks to stand up an environment that is almost secure ready and is benchmarked to certain degrees. We also have internally, we have managed SIEM services, and we're adding on top of those some endpoint detection offerings in the coming months that will increase those. But it's difficult, and a lot of it is that partnership again of the trusted advisors of people who've done this before, Azure, and also more so now AWS as well, that we're getting into with services around that.
Yeah, how about from your side, Steve? Is there anything you've worked on specifically to push to make things more secure, or to simplify that security compliance burden for your customers?
Yeah, I think from a Zadara perspective, as I mentioned, we didn't take a product and put CloudFront onto it. We built this from the ground up to be that multi-tenancy, so we completely isolate every single tenant. So even if you're in a service provider like Softcat, and you take a dedicated VPSA, that means those controllers and those drives are segmented from each customer. So they're in control. They're able to provide encryption keys where the customer owns those encryption keys, not Zadara, not Softcat. If they were offering just a VPSA capability to them, we've added SOC 2, ISO 27001, ISO 27701 into our portfolio, and we take security extremely seriously. It's the number one priority from our perspective, along with data integrity. So it's part of that partnership of us ensuring that we're working very closely with our partners to ensure that we meet their needs. We're fully aware we're an extension of those, so we have to extend their services and work in compliance with their needs.
Okay. Well, let's talk about it from the other side then. I mean, while it is a negative in some cases in terms of people moving because or preventing security compliance preventing them, but there's obviously a lot of things going on the compliance side and the world in general that are changing things. Are you seeing any impact from any of these new political realities like Brexit coming into play that are driving more resources to your localized clouds or your clouds in specific countries? Are you seeing any impact from that from your customers so far? Let's start with Paul first and then go to Steve.
Yeah, I guess from a Softcat side, we deal mainly in the UK, so a lot of our customers are UK based. You've obviously got the main hyperscaler clouds are now all also UK based. I think some of them are in the same facilities that Softcat's data centers are in. So I think customers are becoming more concerned around it, and I think the Brexit thing has focused that in as to whether or not we will still be part of any European data protection laws come the end of this year or not. I don't think I've seen any particular customers within the managed service arena mandate that it's a the kind of data sovereignty is key, but we do deal with government and some of the blue light, so the fire service and the ambulance service, that there is that reliance to have the data in the UK.
Okay. Any other reasons to keep data in those localized areas? Are you seeing any applications or specific things where they want to have it more localized?
I think that does. So things like Office 365, where people don't want it in the US, obviously for latency reasons or for any other reasons like that. I say most of our customers are UK based anyway, so having it locally to them makes sense for most of them. But I think the cloud stuff has definitely made it a bit different. You have to think about where you actually want it, whether there are latency issues or whether there are other things outside of that, compliance issues.
Okay. On your side, Steve, what are you seeing there in terms of customers and their need to do more data sovereignty? Is that becoming an impact? Because you do have data centers in multiple countries.
Yeah, I think you look at what's going on globally. There's unsettled regions right the way across the world, and we look at the impact of COVID. We look at the impact of Brexit. Do we really know what's happening in any location? But certainly, if you look back 5 years ago, none of the cloud providers were in the UK. They had very, very small amounts. Brexit, the announcement of Brexit as a referendum comes along, and suddenly all of the hyperscalers have built in the UK. So clearly, there's fear around what's going to happen. The UK is a major financial hub globally. So therefore, if there are data sovereignty issues, having data remaining in the UK is paramount. We see this right the way across, our customers, certainly across EMEA. I have a major focus across EMEA. Even, organizations that are spread across EMEA. If you're in the Netherlands, data stays within the Netherlands. If you're in Germany, data stays within Germany. So yes, Brexit is fueling some of this, but it's not just a Brexit issue. Every country has its own data sovereignty laws. Europe is not governed by a single law, even though we have laws that govern us. There are laws within the countries that may mandate that certain data has to remain within those countries, and therefore that means that the location of the data, location of those data centers, the location of the service providers, and also, the ownership of those. The U.S. Patriot Act, we know has far-reaching umbilical cords. So, where does that mean for organizations who don't want to be subject to that? What does that mean for them? So, having that choice of location, I think, is critical. And I think also, as you look at the growth of service providers, cloud service providers, and the high latency requirements into a cloud. If you've got an application that needs 10, 20 milliseconds and it's 40, 60, 80 milliseconds to the cloud, then that application's not going to work in that environment. Whereas if you've got something that's maybe 1 or 2 milliseconds because it's city specific, not country specific, then maybe those applications can operate in real time, especially when you start to look at, video technology, you start to look at location services, start to look at, as Paul highlighted, those blue light services that maybe milliseconds make a difference, then maybe actually having things in a more regional basis have more value.
I think a question came in the chat for you, Steve, but I'm curious, what is the go-to-market model in Europe for Zadara?
The go-to-market model in Europe for us is the same as we have globally. It's an OpEx model. We deliver the same capabilities on premises by our service providers into the hyperscalers. It's a completely OpEx model. We've changed the storage world. We came to this model 9 years ago. We've pioneered this on-premises as well as cloud-attached storage model as a 100% OpEx model. It puts the customer in control of how they look every single day.
Okay. Another question that's come up a lot is, a lot of customers want to get to hybrid cloud, multi-cloud type deployment models. Let's start with Paul here, but I'm curious, what are you guys doing to help organizations get to hybrid and multi-cloud type models with your services and whatnot?
Yeah, so hybrid cloud for us is one of Softcat's IT priorities. We have 4 priorities, and that's definitely one, along with data center security and cloud intelligence. From a managed service point of view, we like to think of ourselves as the stepping stone for that journey, the start of the journey for the customer. If they're doing data center consolidation or have to be out of data centers, want to shut them down, we can move their infrastructure into our infrastructure. We're within data centers that have high-speed links out to all of the clouds, so we can then assist them with that onward journey into the cloud if that makes sense. Just reviewing their workloads, it's such a big focus for Softcat around how we do things. We kind of go with an adopt, accelerate, and transform methodology through the process. So. And it's not, we don't just pick one cloud, we are across all of them, mostly with AWS and Azure, but more so now with GCP as well. I think using Zadara helps that because we can use it in the cloud as well. So if customers are happy with that model on our clouds, we can move them to the Zadara model in the cloud as well.
Okay. Steve, how about for your side? What are you seeing there in terms of how you can facilitate that?
I think I would say we've actually had quite a good foresight. We started in the hyperscalers as we saw. I wouldn't say a weakness, but a lack of capability from the hyperscalers at that point. We started delivering block, then we added in NAS capabilities. We've added in dedupe compression capabilities, and then we've also taken that along with our object out into the service providers and out globally. So it's one product from our perspective. That means we talked about that skills gap. If you've only got to learn one product and it's the same product, whether it's attached to a hyperscaler, into a service provider on premises, then your learning curve is far shallower. And if you then combine that with where we're starting to see, the new world evolving, the move to a microservices, Docker container capability, and the mobility that's going to come from that from hyperscaler service providers on premises, then if you take the fact that we were very early to adopt, a Kubernetes CSI driver to enable that mobility, so that if you were to take a data set from Zadara, maybe it's attached into AWS. There's no reason why you can't present that same data set into Azure or Google or back into Softcat's cloud. And this is where I think the capabilities of a capable storage service provider enables you to do things in a very, very different way to having to manually do things in a completely different way depending on your location. And I think that's one of our values, that simplicity.
Okay. Yeah, and another question for you, Steve. I think one of the things I've been observing as we had conversations with end users is more and more of them, to me, are complaining about egress charges. They see this and they feel like they're locked into the cloud. So we definitely hear a lot more complaints these days about egress charges and how that prevents them from getting to a multi-cloud strategy, because that cost of pulling it out of cloud A to put it into cloud B is becoming much more absorbent. Also, we hear a lot about transaction IOPS charges as well, because especially if you don't pack the data correctly, those could be very, very substantial bills as well, as I start pulling lots and lots of little objects out of a cloud and into another cloud, either pulling it back on-prem or going from cloud A to cloud B. It seems like a lot more people are complaining about that. What are you guys doing there, or how are your customers using your services to help reduce some of these egress charges?
So it's an interesting concept, isn't it? The cloud is free to get in, but you pay to get out. It's a bit like Monopoly. You're free to go into jail, but you have to pay to get out of it, I suppose. We don't apply transactional charges, and we don't apply egress charges. So, if we're attached into a public cloud provider like AWS, then it's AWS that will charge the egress charges. But the way that we do it to our storage is, it's across a private direct connect interface, not the public internet. So there's immediate savings there. The transitioning data across an internet connection from most of the cloud providers are at circa 9 cents per gig, etc., where it's probably 2 cents per gig coming across a private connection, across Direct Connect. So we certainly help in those areas. But if you're deploying on premises and you're taking a cloud service and you're effectively bringing the cloud to you, then the fact that you haven't got those egress charges, you haven't got those transaction charges, and even when you look at some of the emergence, AWS has announced Outposts. We're an Outpost partner, but we're not charging egress for access to our storage in Outposts. So, this is where we're able to save organizations money, but still give them that portability, still give them that adaptability. So therefore, without the cloud tax, I would say.
Okay. Are you seeing organizations also using you in that consolidation manner because they know moving from cloud A to cloud B will cause an issue, or are they comfortable just keeping it in the Zadara cloud and having a local connection to whatever VMs or microservices are running in the cloud, or how do you see them actually managing that data day to day?
I think it's still evolving. I think organizations are still evolving. What you find in most organizations, they pick a cloud provider, they go all in. It doesn't matter what the application is, that's where it goes. And that's the way that things start. And then maybe over time, what you start to see is organizations start to get a little bit savvy. They look at the cost. You look at the starting of what we're seeing now, the cloud brokers, those are analyzing your AWS bill, your Azure bill, your Google bill, and going, actually, if you move that application from A to B, you can save X. Now, to do that, you've got to calculate in what's those transaction costs, what's those transition costs. And maybe this is where a capability that Zadara brings in terms of centralizing that storage and using our snapshot and our dedupe and our cloning capabilities, then it brings additional value of reducing your spend on storage. You highlighted earlier on about organizations trying to squeeze their spend, Henry. I think Zadara helps in terms of that squeeze, especially where you don't have to have multiple copies on multiple different storage arrays. Using our clone capabilities, using our remote clone capabilities, where we can project a volume from one location to another and just stream the data in as it's needed, is a great way of enabling those cloud mobility capabilities.
Okay. Paul, on your side, are you seeing more of your customers asking for that? Are they asking you to help them plan for how I can move from one cloud to another, or leverage my data across multiple clouds? Because that's the thing we don't control, is the innovation. And if so-and-so cloud adds a new algorithm and you want to use that algorithm, the old days I had to drag all my data over there. Are your customers asking you for better ways of managing or guidance in how to manage that data?
Not so much the data, but we definitely see customers coming to us and asking around the cloud economic side of looking at cost savings around things and how do they move stuff around to make it more cost effective, because I think the cost of cloud isn't free. It's someone else's data center is that horrible phrase, but it is that you're paying for someone else's facility. The transfer of data obviously does in and out does cost money, and that's the thing I think people don't realize when they do move into the cloud. So I think what Steve said is right, that the Zadara model helps with that, because it means they don't necessarily have to shift it around. But I think the struggle's been without the containerization and the microservices until now. It's not been possible to do that, because moving from AWS to Azure is a migration rather than it's a transformation rather than a migration. So it's kind of been a bit prohibitive, but I think that's definitely opening up now with containerization, because you can just run it anywhere, because it's pretty much the same on any cloud.
Okay, great. Let's turn to the topic of innovation and technology and what's going on there. As Steve mentioned and Paul mentioned, one of the clear benefits of cloud is that ability to change the innovation underneath. So you can make, like the transaction that Steve showed, from customers going from hard drives to flash without even having any impact there. I'm just curious, let's start with Steve on this one, but what innovations would you like to see in cloud storage and data protection offerings going forward? What are the type of things that your customers are asking for?
I think customers they're becoming more savvy. I think they're looking for organizations to help them look deeper into their data. Not just provide storage, but maybe look into the data itself, being able to analyze that, maybe closer integration with applications, whether that's scale out database, so that's looking at files, looking at the types of files that they are indexing it, but then also being able to maybe move that data between tiers, move that down to magnetic from SSD, because they may need high performance elements of that data, especially when you're doing big data analytics. You may then want to push that automatically off to an archive tier, maybe off to object storage, but then you want to be able to pull that back really quickly when you need to do that. So we're certainly seeing that transition happen within the marketplace. I think also organizations, they're looking for standardization. And I think Paul touched on it there around the microservices, and what this push towards a Kubernetes, Docker containerization. That standardization means that you're not worried about the VM flavor. You're not worried about, is it VMware, is it KVM, is it Hyper-V, is it AWS, is it Google? You're able to just say, hey, I'm going to write this application and I'm going to deploy it knowing that the package that I'm deploying to is standard everywhere. Now, that helps innovation from the ISVs, because now they're no longer caring about the technology underneath. They're caring about their application. And if you're a business, do you really care about your storage? I'm in the storage business. Does anybody care whether it's one brand of SSD or another brand of magnetic disk? No, they care about their application. They care about their business. And I think as we see organizations looking more and more up the tiers at their applications and their innovation at the application layer, we're going to see more and more of that standardization and that API-driven standardization. And that's what we're seeing. We've been API-driven from day one. I think that's the shift that's happening in this next phase, I would say, over the next 3 to 5 years.
Okay. And on your side, Paul, is there any innovation you want to see or something you'd like to see in terms of improvements going forward?
I think one of the things is around backups, and not just the backups, but the restore speeds. So obviously, people tend to back up to large capacity, slow disks, and that works fine if your restore needs to happen outside of your backup window. But chuck that restore into 11 o'clock at night, and suddenly you're fighting with everything else that's trying to back up at the same time as restore. So I think the move to the larger SSDs, and as again that that whole cost factor comes into it. But as we get larger and larger SSDs, I think that will naturally kind of migrate to being used for the backups. Maybe not for everything, maybe for the critical systems that if you do need to get it back, it needs to be quickly. And I think one of the things that I think Zadara have done is the innovation that they've done since we've been with them has always been with the cost in mind. So they don't release a feature and say it's going to cost you £11 billion. They release a feature and say it's not really going to cost you much more, but here's a new feature we've added, or we're going to change the drives out for some faster, bigger ones. When I think we joined the Zadara model, we were at the tipping point of magnetic and SSDs, and it just made sense to pretty much go all SSD for us. It seemed pointless to use magnetic disks. So I think that backup, faster recovery is probably something which is, as data continues to grow, is going to become something which will be a pain point for people.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up.
That's something we built in, Henry. I look at because of the way that we've developed our technology. It doesn't really matter. We take our storage nodes; they're software defined. Those drives can be used for block, for NAS, for object. Whether they're SSDs. I've heard organizations talk about them being the first to deliver object storage on SSD. Sorry, guys, you were all second. We delivered it first. And because we've built that innovation, as the market space evolves and those drives get larger, and maybe there will be a need to put SSD as the primary tier into object storage for certain workloads. I talk about Zebra Medical. They're over a petabyte. They're all on magnetic today. But they're delivering 2 gigabytes per second of read for their data analysis on that environment. So even today, you can utilize object storage at performance if you design it and you define it in the right way. And then we're going to see newer technologies. We've already seen NVMe, Optane. We make great use of those technologies, and we'll continue to innovate and push that down into the market when it becomes relevant. As Paul said, we don't take the latest and greatest and mark it up. We wait till that technology is market ready and then deploy it at that point at the right price point.
So were you surprised by this push towards all-flash object? I think the market trend is basically because customer expectations have just shot through the roof, and you have all these people that say, I can't have that database down ever. if it goes down, it's got to come back in a couple minutes. And you simply can't do that with a bunch of YouTube disks. It just takes too long, and just the rehydration elements of that are just too expensive. What else are you seeing? What other things are you seeing that are surprising in terms of why object on flash?
I think the market expectations are that we've traditionally gone with NAS. Okay, our file access for forever has been NAS, and there's companies out there that built dynasties on their NAS technologies, and I think the market is changing because I think organizations are trying, you said it earlier on, they're trying to drive their cost down. So object is the way to drive the cost down, but they need to drive the scalability up. And when you're talking, petabytes, and I'll refer back to what we're doing with Rakuten, we're talking of, multiple petabyte installations. They're huge. You've got to be able to scale and keep scaling independently and incrementally. This concept of buying something, running it for 3 or 5 years. Can you imagine trying to move off a 60 petabyte object storage every 2 or 3 years? It's got to move software defined. And this is where I think that change and us driving that change is helping people to think in different ways. Can I actually use this emerging technology in a different way?
Okay. I guess the other emerging technology that's coming up a bit more has been storage class memory, SCM. I noticed you guys added a service on that also. Are you seeing early traction for that, or does it feel more like is that going to be something that's going to take longer to deploy?
So we built that in very, very early. Our relationship partnership with Intel at that point to build Optane into our all-flash arrays. We use that for that very high-speed primary tier for our dedupe and our metadata tables. So we were very quick and very early to see the benefits of adopting that technology and enabling that to drive innovation from our perspective. Obviously, that's expensive technology, but history tells us that the cost of that will come down, and maybe there's a cutover point, maybe in the not too distant future, that says take that Optane technology, build that in as the actual storage layer, not just as the very high performance metadata layer. But again, it's driven by cost. It's driven by at what point does it become valuable enough at the right level for a customer to adopt it en masse. So we've utilized that in the right way today. We've combined that with NVMe technology. We've combined that also with utilizing magnetic, because those sizes continue to grow. The helium drives that we take from Western Digital, they're ultra reliable. They're as reliable as SSDs. Which is quite astounding, really, when you look at how reliable those helium drives have become. So it's not just a case of throw the old technology away. It's stop using that technology when it no longer becomes relevant. And if you can replace it with something that's better, then do so at the right time.
Okay. How about for you, Paul? I mean, obviously it's still early days for SCM. Are you seeing any immediate use cases where your customers are asking to use that right now?
I don't think I've seen any. No, I think it is still. It's going to be the high-end enterprises that are trying to get the jump on competitors for that few extra bits of performance, or for the applications that need that run. But I don't think I've seen anything particular that's come across now.
Okay, great. I guess another question, in terms of where we are today, in terms of a lot of social distancing and whatnot, and given that you're both services companies, what are you guys doing to make sure that, at both Softcat and Zadara, what are you doing to make sure your staff stays engaged and is able to work well with customers? Let's start with Paul first on that.
It's been a challenging ride, I think, for the whole of Softcat. Obviously, Softcat is a sales company first, and services is part of that business as well. But what Softcat does really well is keep people engaged. They overshare information sometimes, but that's not a bad thing. It is that they've kept everyone, not just management, but also the staff, aware of what decisions they're making, why they're making them. We managed to not have to furlough anyone throughout the process, so that was a decision they made quite early on. I think the engagement has been difficult for everyone. I run a team of 12 people who normally sit in a room together, so you kind of get the feeling of what's going on day to day. We've just added twice, so we have a Tuesday and a Thursday team huddle where we just sit and chat about what's going on, if anyone's got any questions or anything to bring up. So I think that's almost brought us closer together than it was before, because we are actually talking instead of you just kind of picking up that information. I mean, Softcat's kickoff, so their normal sales kickoff, is usually a grand affair in a hotel somewhere, a day of conferences on a Saturday, then an evening of awards and big party. They obviously had to switch that to a virtual event, and our marketing team just pulled that completely out of the bag in a very short period of time. It was a week it was 3 sessions but spread over the week, and it was engaging, and it kept everyone involved. And yeah, it was. I think people were a bit wary of how it was going to work, because it's usually this big, like I say, this big party and event where everyone gets together, and it's the first time they've had to do it like that. So
how about in terms of before I ask Steve, I mean, Paul, on your side, have you seen a big change in customer engagement as well? Because what I've heard from some customers is they want to have fewer discussions than they would have had in previous years. So does it seem like it's more direct, more because you can't go visit and can't do specific things? Has that changed the sales cycle at all?
I think it has, and I think for some of the sales guys, from what I've heard, it's actually brought them closer to their customers because they're having more regular contact with them. I know of one of our education teams. They deal with a lot of local councils across the UK. Have actually started getting these people collectively together at the same time. So again, it's almost enabled them to bring their customers all together to have those discussions. But I think you're right. It is making it challenging. It's challenging for our sales guys to keep that engagement with their customers. But for some, I think it's had a positive effect.
Okay. And for you, Steve, any major changes, or what has Zadara been doing to function well in this type of environment?
I think the benefit from Zadara's perspective. We're a global company anyway. We've got locations spread from the US to the UK to Germany, Australia, Israel, India. So we're a global team anyway. We have to communicate remotely. For the 6.5 years I've been here, that's the way I've interacted with a lot of my colleagues. So not many things have changed from the day-to-day perspective in terms of being able to utilize those tools to keep people engaged. I think what has changed is certainly from a management team. We've been encouraged to hold more one-to-ones with our team, just to make sure that mentally they're happy, they're okay. Because it's challenging times. People have gone from maybe working in an office to suddenly sitting at their kitchen table, because they haven't got a dedicated office. That transition is not easy. So having that regular contact with them, and I look at Kerry, who's the VP for sales in EMEA. We organise this virtual beers on a Friday for the team, just to this is the end of the week, guys. Let's switch off. Let's talk about anything but not work, not Zadara, not customers, and that's as important a thing as anything else. But I think alongside that, we have a very good senior management team. We have the whole all hands meetings. We're kept informed of what's going on, and we've not laid off a single member of staff. We've had challenges in certain areas. People have gone into lockdown in different areas around the globe. But that's just meant that we've had to support those people, in those one-to-one sessions or group sessions, just more regular. But I think we've done a very, very good job of handling this whole thing. That's a massive change for so many different organizations.
Yeah. Thanks, guys. I think we're at the top of the hour now, and this has been a fantastic discussion. Thank you so much, Steve and Paul, for joining us today. Any other things we should talk about, or any questions in the audience? Hold on for a second, see if anything pops up. Yeah, looking good. Tricia, should we close it out?
Yes, that concludes our virtual webcast today. Thank you, Henry. Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Paul. As a reminder, the online on-demand version of this webinar will be available shortly. And on behalf of Zadara, Softcat, and 451 Research, thank you for attending and have a great day.